without further ado, I'll introduce Rory and let him introduce himself. Rory, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
It's great to be here with you. I'm really excited that we get to talk about this. And when I first came across ConveyorLabs, I was really impressed. This was probably March, maybe February that I reached out to you, and
hmm
you had maybe, I don't know, 300 followers or something on Twitter. It was a nascent protocol. You were still in the design phase. But what struck me was that you were aggregating things basically in an off chain way without explicitly doing anything off chain, and in a way that was still decentralized enough to be censorship resistant. And that's what
hmm
really stuck out was the approach that you had taken was so novel and so different than anything else I'd seen in crypto, and that's turned out to be what other people are calling an intent based architecture. It's a very
hmm
recent design trend that people are articulating. So yeah, I mean, maybe you could tell me what is. I think this is a good place to start. What is Conveyor Labs?
Yeah. Just to quickly introduce myself. So I'm Roy Grayman, founder and CEO of ConveyorLabs. Over, let's say, about the past 2 years is when Conveyor started. And what we've been working on are essentially protocols to help make DeFi traders' lives a lot easier. Over the first year and a half or so, we were developing this automation protocol for limits and stop losses, but in a way that's fully decentralized, trustless, self-custodial, and leverages a lot of these intents. But most recently, over the past 6 months or so, we've been focusing on an aggregator that actually leverages other aggregators whom we have partnerships with to find the best route on how to swap different token pairs for both retail DeFi traders, institutional traders, and then also some B2B partnerships that we have either successfully closed with, and then others that we're working on right now.
That's awesome. And something I heard you say there is making DeFi traders' lives easier and using limits and stop losses, like using limit orders and stop loss orders, which is something that DEXs can't traditionally do. I think I've seen in the news recently that 1inch was doing something like this or trying to get an order book. Maybe you could contrast how Conveyor does this, or talk a little bit about like what those are, maybe define for users like what are limit orders and what are stop loss orders.
Yeah, just to give like the surface level, there's two different ways that you can handle automated trades when it comes to limits orders or stop losses. You can either do what like 1inch or Gelato does and store these orders off chain and then have a whole group of solvers that combination of market makers that fill these orders via on chain. And then you have others like what we've built. It's a fully on chain order book. So your order is placed, so it lives on chain. It could publicly be executed on chain, and then that transaction finally executes on chain. So there's definitely pros and cons to both. The way that we order, how we store orders, you have to pay gas to store those orders on chain. But the benefit is that you're not relying on any kind of third party or backend database for that order to be executed in a further date, which is one of the big benefits that we have. Looking at 1inch, all their orders are off-chain based. So while it's free to place those orders, you might not necessarily always be getting the best price for when that order actually does execute.
Yeah, and I mean, you're also losing the censorship resistant aspect because there's a trusted third party somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
which is what Conveyor routes around, pun
Mm-hmm.
intended. And I think it's important to highlight here that you're doing all this while saving users 50% in gas costs because of the.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So when we were building this automation protocol, in the process, we accidentally created an aggregator. We were looking for with this off-chain executor program that we open source called the COEX, the Conveyor Off-Chain Executor, when filling those orders, we needed to try to find the best way of accessing all these different liquidity pools from these different dexes in order to fill that order and do it in the most optimized way. So if you look at current aggregators, a lot of them will use this, in a sense, router contract, where if I swap my tokens and it interacts between, let's say, two different liquidity pools, historically the tokens would go from, in the transaction of doing the swap, it'd go my wallet to the router to the first liquidity pool to make that first swap. That output would go back to the router, then it goes to the second liquidity pool, then back to the router, then back to my wallet. There's a ton of, in my opinion, unnecessary transactions and transfers that are happening in this approach. And so what we've been doing with our aggregator is when we generate the call data, we interact the user's wallet in a way to where it will send the tokens from their wallet directly to the first liquidity pool. The output of that will go to the second liquidity pool and then back to the user's wallet at the very end. And so by eliminating, let's say, 50% of those transfers, that's how we're able to save that 50% for each of these transactions. And, it's not that same for every single transaction. There are split routes. Sometimes we have to use V2 or V3 callbacks. But in the most optimized approach, we can interact the user's wallet directly with the liquidity pools.
That is fascinating. And I love how you say in the process of designing this protocol, you accidentally created an aggregator. Mm-hmm. I am very curious what the design process was like and how you came up with that. But I want to first highlight and give you a platform to share how you got into crypto and a little bit of your background, because your story is also equally as fascinating as this protocol, and that is setting a very high bar. I'd love for you to share what your background is and how you got into crypto so we can highlight you as a founder as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I first got involved in crypto back in 2018. This is kind of around the last bull run that we had, when Bitcoin hit its all-time high, went past 20K. But I was seeing things like crypto kitties that they were selling for millions and millions of dollars for this piece of digital art, which I had no idea what it was about. But this was also while I was on deployment, and I had another startup that I was working on. We ultimately ended up going through Y Combinator back in January of 2021, and have a family. So one of those things kind of had to go by the wayside, and unfortunately for that time, it was crypto. But when I got out of the military, this is after spending 12 and a half years in the SEAL teams back in February of 2021, got reintroduced to it. Kind of learned about this crazy thing called DeFi. And so it took me about 24 hours to even make my first trade. I was price shopping between all these different exchanges. I didn't know what PancakeSwap was. And the idea of aggregators wasn't even really a thing at then. So about 6 months after getting into DeFi, realized that I was quickly, I was spending all day looking at charts and didn't have any time to spend with family and friends. So that's where the idea of this automation protocol started, and trying to build it in a way where we could be trustless and we could be fully decentralized, and all without requiring traders to send their tokens to us or to some sort of shared contract. So that's kind of how everything started.
Wow. That's an incredible entry story. I can't imagine there are very many SEALs who found crypto on deployment and then are starting their own protocols.
Yeah, I think quite the career shift.
Yeah, definitely different. I'm very curious. Do you see any crossover between what you learned in the SEAL teams? This is totally me just geeking out on SEAL lore and military things. But what skills have you found transfer between those two?
I would say problem solving and contingencies. Those are probably the two biggest things that transferred over. And then also, working with some of the highest performers in the world, you learn about, okay, this is how to run a team. This is how to work alongside others. Um, and crypto's changing every single week. Something that is hot today might not be hot next week. So it's just, okay, if things can go wrong, when they do go wrong, how are you going to respond to that? How are you going to shift focus? How are you going to, redesign your value prop or the direction that you're heading? So a lot of it is, when things go wrong, how are you going to respond to that? That's probably the biggest bit that I took away from being in the teams, to translating that to crypto.
I can imagine things like that come up a lot in the design process where you're like, oh crap, we totally overlooked that. And
Mm-hmm.
you do your best to prepare, but part of, from what I understand, the kind of training you get in the SEAL teams is dealing with those contingencies.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering, what was your design process like?
So when we were building out our automation protocol, I would say 90% of it, and this, again, translating over from being in the SEAL teams, I'd say 90% of it is looking at it from, okay, what feature we're trying to build in, how can a bad actor exploit this feature? And that's how it was when we were doing mission planning for wherever it was that we're deploying to. We're not looking at it as if things can go right all the time. It's, okay, on this certain direction that we're going, what's the worst that can happen? So we'd always look at things from how can a bad actor exploit this certain feature? So that really kind of drove a lot of the design decisions that we made. And so when we created this aggregator, we had a decision to make. It's, okay, do we improve the algorithm compared to all the time and resources that 1inch and Paraswap have put into designing their algorithm, or is there a way that we can work together on this? Admittedly, crypto is not a very open place. It's very cutthroat. A lot of people don't like working with others because of trust issues or just being as cutthroat as it is. I wanted to change that. I wanted to go against that status quo. So that's actually where we got our partnership with 1inch and Paraswap. I reached out to them and said, hey, this is the thing that we're working on, kind of extending an olive branch and throwing ourselves all out there for them to very easily say, no, we're not going to work with you. But after getting on the call with both of them, just they were very, very open to what we're working on, and definitely wanted to come up with ways on how we can make this partnership even more long lasting and beneficial to both parties.
That's really interesting, because I first of all appreciate so much that idea of working with other people in their strengths and playing to each other's strengths. And the second thing that I think about is Paraswap and 1inch were probably shitting their pants thinking this guy's going to eat our lunch if we don't provide him API access. So you definitely came from a position of strength there, I would imagine. And that is just such a cool design philosophy to hear you're working with people in ways that are going to benefit both of you. And I think to what you said about design requirements and thinking about how can this go wrong? Okay, what are ways that bad actors could take advantage of this? Not always assuming that things are going to go right. I think that makes ConveyorLabs a paragon of thinking through things from an economic security perspective rather than just a technical security perspective. And that's one thing that I appreciate. I know we've talked a bit about economic security in the past. And to define for listeners what that is, economic security is the alignment of incentives in a protocol such that all users' incentives are met and there are no ways to subvert their intentions or the intents of the particular users in the protocol. So I'm gonna define intents in a moment, but just wanted to highlight that Conveyor is one of those protocols that has censorship resistance as the first priority and has really thought through a lot of the things, the design of the protocol in ways that make it very robust and fully decentralized in the truest sense. So the title of this space today is What Are Intents? And we want to talk about this budding protocol design trend. And the reason
this space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
I'll first define this. An intent is been brought up in the context of block producing and proposer builder separation, and a lot of things to do with MEV. So the kind of people that are talking about this are like David Crapi and Bernabe Monod from the Roll Up Incentives Group at the Ethereum Foundation, and some others who are talking about this. But the high level of an intent is the user's intent in taking a particular action on a protocol. And what people have started to notice, sort of in line with economic security exploits, is that the intents of users are not always perfectly coded in to the design of protocols. And a lot of the time, there are exploits available in protocols that leverage that mismatch, that look for the ways that the protocol is not either not perfectly designed and not fully incentive compatible, to use another synonym for economic security, but is translating, mistranslating the intent of a user to do something that the protocol was not intended to do. That is like one use of the word intents, and the other, and the way that I define intents, is that the intents, we're starting to see the narrative of intents-based architecture, or intents-first architecture. And these architectures and protocols are agnostic to the ways that a particular outcome is achieved. And Conveyor does this because a user is not particularly concerned with the outcome, with the way, the pools that a protocol hits, that an aggregator hits. They just want a best price, right? And so that, in this way, ConveyorLabs is an intents-first architecture, an intents-based architecture. And this is a very new term. I'm only familiar with it because I've seen it come up a couple times in the context of MEV. CowSwap is often listed as another intents-based architecture, and maybe Rory can speak to that, as CowSwap is another AMM. Mm-hmm. But that is, that's where I wanted to define intents for people. And I wanted to hear from you, Rory, is this something that you're familiar with, or a concept that you've thought of? And how do you see ConveyorLabs being an intents-based protocol?
Yeah, so we were working on intents before the phrase intents even came into existence. It's been, a couple months that phrase has been running around. And I didn't even really know of its existence until very recently. But the way that we're leveraging intents is, for example, through our automation protocol. Like you mentioned before, a user isn't saying, okay, I want to swap 1 ETH for 2,000 USDC, and I want to go through this specific pool, because there's ways that, either if that liquidity were to dry up or whatever it may be, might not necessarily get the best price going through that specific pool. And so when a user places an order through automation protocol, all they're saying is, I'm giving approval for the contract, for the order book contract, to spend the one wrapped Ethereum that's in my wallet. And in exchange, I want to get at least 1,800 USDC. The user isn't having to decide or specify which liquidity pools it wants to go through. It's the solvers, or the executors of our protocol, that are constantly looking for the best swap through all these different liquidity pools in order to hit that amount. So our contract, it's a multi-call contract, meaning it will accept any kind of arbitrary call data, but it has to hit the minimum of, is that user getting that 1,800 USDC by the end of the transaction? Doesn't care about if there's a flash loan involved with a sandwich, or injection of liquidity into a specific pool to raise the price floor. It doesn't care about any of that. So it leaves up to the solver, the executor, to decide that for them, but it has to hit that minimum criteria of sending that 1,800 USDC to that user's wallet by the end of the transaction.
And that's so elegant, because it's not just that you're leaving it to chance and saying, oh, well, we hope that they're going to find the best price. No, the coexes, these conveyor executors, are searching constantly for the best route, and they're competing with each other to provide that best price. So not only are you agnostic to the way that it gets there, but you can be confident because of the way the protocol is designed that that will happen because the economic or incentives are aligned in that way.
Exactly.
That's fantastic. And I think the thing, something that I'd like to highlight that's sort of speculative here that I've mentioned before is that this, in a roundabout way, doesn't just reach DEXs, it also reaches centralized exchanges because there are arbitrageurs who are going between the two. So you're not only tapping into all the liquidity on DEXs in a truly free market way, you're tapping into the liquidity on centralized exchanges because some coex could decide to pull in just-in-time liquidity to their own pool in order to route your a user's bid for their limit order or their stop loss or any kind of order they want to make and provide that, and therefore thereby looping in the centralized exchange order book as well. So it's just a really well designed protocol, and that's what I want to share with the listeners in this space, and something I want to highlight. That's and full disclosure, I have no no financial interest in ConveyorLabs at this point. They're just like a stellar protocol that uses intents, and I want to put that out there so that people can really see how great of a design ConveyorLabs has and what function it's providing. So I want to open up and ask, first of all, if anyone has any questions, we would love to answer those. If you have any questions for Rory, for ConveyorLabs, please post those in the comments, and we'll get to those in a minute. I wanted to ask Rory, what's on your roadmap? What are the things that you're thinking about going forward for ConveyorLabs?
Yeah, so where we are sitting right now, we, with our aggregator, have integrated with both 1-inch and Paraswap routes. So we access their API, find out, okay, whenever a user queues up a swap on our platform, which of the routes is the best route? Is it Paraswap or 1-inch? And then we make that transaction cheaper, have the gas savings involved there. Some things that we have on our roadmap is adding in additional aggregators, adding in support for 0x. We also have a partnership with OpenOcean, so adding them to our batch of aggregators that we try to find the best route from. And today we're launched on 5 different chains: Ethereum, Polygon, BNB Chain, Arbitrum, and Optimism. But we are fully EVM compatible. So I want to launch on chains like Base or ZK Sync, Phantom, Avalanche. The list is kind of unlimited or limitless with all the places that we can deploy to. And an interesting shift, though, we, over the past month or so, have been shifting more towards a B2B approach. So instead of reaching out to retail traders directly to use our platform, while they can still use our site if they just connect their wallet and use it very similarly how you'd use Uniswap or 1-inch or Paraswap. But working with these different partner integrations, we actually have one in our chat right now, OmniX, who is finishing up with their beta right now, and they are using us as their backend swap provider. So anytime any of their users, and it's a Telegram trading bot with a ton more features on top of that, so I highly encourage you guys to check them out. So whenever any of their users are queuing swaps on any of those chains, it goes through our API. We reach out to 1-inch and Paraswap, and that whole cycle continues. So it's not only something that's beneficial to us because we're getting more volume and a little bit of revenue in the process, but it's benefiting them as well for the referral fees. It's benefiting the trader for paying less gas overall, and then it's benefiting the aggregators that we're connected with because they earn a portion of our revenue as well. So it's one of those rare times where there's no one in the system that is at any kind of disadvantage. It only benefits everyone who's involved, which is, I think, the beautiful thing about what we're building.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the same thing. It's it's win, 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 win. And those are the kinds of protocols that we strive to design as well, especially with the features that you have of censorship resistance and decentralization enshrined as probably the first priority of these protocols. You have this economic security from the alignment of incentives
Mm-hmm.
as far as I can tell, and you also have this censorship resistant architecture that keeps the protocol live beyond your involvement. So I love that approach. It sounds like you're a few things on the roadmap are adding DEX integrations and chains because they're EVM compatible, and that you're
Mm-hmm.
moving more toward a B2B route. I am curious because I actually don't know. Do you have a token at this point? I'm not going to ask when token. I'm just curious if you have one right now.
No token at this time. The way that we've kind of incentivized everything when it comes to the referral program that we just launched and benefits for referred users is everything's paid out in whatever the native gas token is for each chain. So those who leverage us for our referral program, right? If you refer anyone to swap on Conveyor, anytime they make a swap, you will earn a portion of what we make. And it's at no disadvantage to the referred user. They in fact actually earn, or they pay a little bit less gas overall for being referred. So it's this double-sided reward system. But because we're paying everyone out in for referrers and affiliate rewards and everything in the native gas token, we don't plan on launching a token just yet, but it's something that down the road, once we've really honed in our go-to-market strategy, our product market fit, and have a successful product outside of just a token launch, is when we would be looking to have that TGE.
Absolutely.
Or
Yeah.
IDO, one of them.
Yeah. Or, I mean, there could be a third option there. I can see a few ways that you guys could launch a token in what I call an A-compliant manner. So it's not strictly complying. It's not complying. It's just not having to comply. And those are the kinds of distributions that we're focused on at Token Dynamics. And the way I think about this is you guys are, rather than trying to do some kind of pump and dump token to get organic marketing going and incentivize people that way, you have a great incentive system so that users can participate as marketers through the affiliate marketing, the referral program. And that is a successful model we've seen pioneered by GMX, I think is one of the protocols that's best known for this in terms of decentralization, decentralized protocols. Binance had a great referral program, and some other sort of CeFi, companies have had great referral programs. But GMX was one that proved that this is an excellent strategy in DeFi, and so I'm interested to participate in that, and also in any future where you do issue a token. I'm very eager to see what that looks like and help you if needed.
Awesome.
But
when airdrop.
when airdrop, yeah, exactly. When a compliant distribution strategy for decentralized token. And so, okay, so that's, I think that's a pretty good summary. We got a description of what ConveyorLabs is, how it works, how you can participate, how ConveyorLabs uses Intents, this design, this budding protocol design, new type of architecture. I think to summarize that and to go back to Intents for a second before opening it up to questions in the audience. By the way, if you have questions, post them in the comments. We'll get to them momentarily. But to summarize Intents, I think what I heard as a functional definition is where a user is not necessarily trying to configure all of the parameters in a protocol, where users of AMMs don't really care what pools they're routing through. They don't even care which aggregators they're using. They just want the cheapest price. ConveyorLabs fulfills that desire for users in a way that's agnostic of the underlying mechanisms that are used. As long as it's secure, as long as it's providing that best price for users, they're happy to use Conveyor. I think that's a good place to open it up to audience questions. So I'm going to click into this. I see we had one question to answer a bit about, tell us more about the referral program. I think we've got that covered. We have an audience question from Mr. B. Does market volatility affect the gas fees? I know we say 50%, but we know that during high volatility, fees are sometimes high. Can you speak to that, Rory?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's kind of two components. to what you pay for gas. There's the base gas cost of running those specific functions on those smart contracts. And then there's the priority fee, or the GUE. You'll see this fluctuate, low when there's not a whole lot of transactions pending in the meme pool. And then when you see like an NFT launch or a new token that launches, you'll see a ton of transaction in the mem pool, and that will really ramp up this priority fee, or the GUE, that you're paying to get included in that block. And so the beautiful thing is that base gas cost, it's relative across the board. So base gas cost for low congestion times is the same base gas cost as high congestion times. It's just that priority fee that's different. So say if we're able to save 40% or 50% during times of lower volume, we're able to save that same amount at higher congestion as well, because everything, in a sense, is relative when it comes to how we're processing that transaction and all that. So gas fees, and that's actually the beautiful thing, is when gas fees are a lot higher, sometimes you're paying as much as $100, or I've seen it as high as $200 to make a single swap. I mean, even saving 20% of that, right? If you could save $20 on a swap just by having it much more efficient through swapping with us, that's money that you're not having to otherwise pay validators. So it does scale accordingly, which is the beautiful thing.
Yeah. So to recap that, the idea is if gas fees are high, then they're going to be high across the board, and you guys are saving 50 or 20 or whatever it is, a sizable percentage of whatever those gas fees are. And so that's going to translate to tens of dollars per trade, and potentially tens of thousands of dollars for a large, for a significantly volumed whale degen, or any average user who's using this is going to be saving whatever 50% of their fees are. And that turns out to be a pretty big number in the long run, probably something that'll make you competitive. Could be the difference between competitiveness as a trader and having to work a day job at McDonald's. So I think in the end, it's going to be significant cost savings for whoever's using it. That's the thing that sticks out to me, at least.
Yeah, there was one thing to touch on with the referral program, just because there's a couple points on that I didn't mention. So the way that we're actually monetize this whole thing is, let's say if a 1-inch swap cost $10 in Ethereum in gas, we're able to do the same thing in $10. There's a $10 gas savings delta there. What we do is we take a protocol fee of 50% of whatever the gas savings is. So in this case, it would be $5 worth of Ether. And then we pass the remaining of those savings to the trader. So in that exact scenario, the trader would only pay $15 for the swap versus the $20 if they were to go through, let's say, 1-inch directly. But the referral program is, of that money that we make on the for the protocol fee, I made a decision to be extremely aggressive with how much money we're giving away. So in that case of us getting $5 for that, if there was a refer to that, they would get 30%. So what is that? $1.50 or something like that. I can't math right now. I think it's $1.50. But
yep.
But yeah, and that's kind of right for right now in perpetuity. That's something that's designed, that's built into the smart contract of the protocol fee. If there's a refer, give them 30%. That's immutable. We can't change that even on our back end right now. So, but we wanted to be super aggressive with it. So any kind of B2B partner integrations, or even if you're a retail trader and want to just share Conveyor with your friends, every single time they make swaps, you'll be earning a portion of whatever we make. And their friends will also be paying less gas overall as a referred user. So hope that shines a little bit light on how we monetize everything, what our referral program's about, and how it kind of benefits both the referrer and the referred user.
That's brilliant. And I love that that's aligned with the value that users are providing to the protocol, where it's not just that they're getting an airdrop token for having traded through Uniswap or SushiSwap at some point, or having LP'd on some exchange. It's that they're getting volume proportional to how much they can share it And for context, guys, Uniswap is paying a 0% referral fee. So ConveyorLabs is a significant improvement on that. And I think this is a great place to wrap up the space. We've talked about Intents, we've talked about ConveyorLabs. Rory, where can users find this protocol and where can they access the referral program that's paying out 30%?
Yeah, so to try one of our swaps and sign up as a refer, app.conveyor.finance. But we also have a Discord that you can join in as well, and highly encourage you guys to follow us on Twitter, X now, at ConveyorLabs.
Fantastic. App.conveyor.finance. Join the Discord, follow the Twitter, and stay tuned for more updates from ConveyorLabs. Rory, it's been a pleasure talking with you today about Intents and about what you're doing with Conveyor. Really excited for the future of this protocol and for all the users that you're going to be getting in the near future. From this space, from other spaces, I think there's a lot that we're going to see coming from ConveyorLabs, guys, and I'm really excited to have brought you on today. Thanks so much for joining, and thank you everyone for joining and listening in and for your thoughtful questions.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and for everyone who listened in as well. This has been awesome, and I hope to be a part of this again in the future.
Really looking forward to it, Rory. Thanks so much. Catch you guys all later. Talk to you soon.